So if you can press record, there we go. Uh, Welcome everyone. My name is Paul Wolf. I serve as president of the New York Coalition for Open Government. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that advocates for transparency in government. We release a couple reports each year, and we're here today to release our latest report, which is regarding New York State agencies and FOIL requests. And the topic of the report is that New York State agencies are not tracking FOIL requests, and they should. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction to what the report is about. Then I'm going to turn it over to Anne Marie Reeb, who is a member of our board of directors who coordinated this whole thing. She's going to go through some charts and graphs to hit some highlights. And then it'll come back to me just to briefly talk about some of the legislation that we are seeking to get passed, which ties in with this report. And then we'll open it up to questions. So there's two parts to this report. One is that we did a FOIL request to 70 state agencies, and we tracked the response to that FOIL request. And another part of this is our FOIL request asked for information regarding the FOIL requests these state agencies received in 2022. So kind of two parts to this. And just a couple highlights I want to mention. So the FOIL request was, we asked these agencies, please provide us records that you have that shows the number of requests that you received in 2022, the number of FOIL requests that you've denied, what is the average response time, tell us about appeals, how many appeals, what were the results of the appeals. So that was the FOIL request. So for our FOIL request itself, 88% of the agencies timely acknowledged the request. By law, they're supposed to acknowledge the request within 5 business days. So 88%, very good number. Should be 100%, but overall, pretty good as far as, or very good as far as acknowledging our request. And then the length of time that it took them to provide information to our request was also very good. 60% of the state agencies within 20 business days provided us the information we requested. And within 30 business days, it was like 83%. So all in all, pretty timely response. But there were some laggards. There were some agencies that took up to 183 days, which is, clearly unacceptable to provide the information. So, the Department of Labor was very slow, Division of Housing Community Renewal, New York State Police, kind of people that we've heard complaints about in the past. But as far as their 2022 FOIL requests, so what we were trying to get at is, how many were there? Do you track them? And what we learned, which we were not surprised to learn, is that only 20% of state agencies were able to tell us that they tracked their FOIL requests, and even less had logs to back that up. And that's a problem. When we seek to reform the FOIL system, we have a lot of stories and examples that we point out. And the pushback that we've gotten frequently is, yeah, but that's just anecdotal stories. We need statistics. Where's the proof? Well, it's the state agencies that have the proof. They're the ones that receive the requests. And what this report shows is very few of them are able to tell us how many requests they've even received in a year, let alone what the average response time was. We got some responses that were self-reporting. We have no idea whether that information is correct or accurate, but very few are tracking it. They don't know how many denials. They don't know the reasons for the denials. They don't know how many appeals. And this shouldn't be a mystery. It shouldn't be a mystery as to how many FOIL requests are being received and how long it's taking. So that was the purpose of this report. I will turn it over to Anne Marie to go over some graphic information. The report is online at our website at nyopengov.org. And I think it's under the heading publications. If you click on that, you'll get the report, and there's charts and exhibits accompanying it as well. So let me turn it over to Anne Marie.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning, everyone. I'm Anne Marie Reeve, and I'm just going to work on sharing my screen here. And it's just not pulling up. Okay. So what I'm going to go over are some of our exhibits, which we will will be available to you after this meeting, as well as some of the graphs that are actually in the report. So as Paul stated, we foiled 70 state agencies. This first exhibit here is, I'm sorry, I guess I'm not at the beginning here. This is the first 35 agencies. And then the next graph is the exhibit is the rest of the 35. Of these 70 agencies, only 63 or 65 responded. You'll see later where we change it to 63 because in their FOIL responses, two of the agencies, one being the Canal Corp and Governor's Office of Storm Recovery, were responded to by a different agency. And because we could not determine exactly whose FOIL request responses they were, we combined them. So as you can see, 88% of the state agencies responded within the 5 business days to acknowledge our FOIL request. And this graph here, this is when Paul had mentioned about how long it took them to complete our FOIL request. So as you can see, a lot of them responded in quite a timely manner. But on this one, you'll see at the bottom, there was a few that took a lot longer. I point out the number 59, the Division of Homes and Community Renewal, which is also combined with the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery. They took 146 days to respond to us. And on average, they normally take 142 days to respond, which is way too long, especially for the little information they provided. Sorry, it might go too fast. This is the decision. I don't know why this is in here like this. Yes, this is okay. This is our decision of our FOIL appeals. So we did 10 FOIL appeals to 10 state agencies. As you can see below the graph, it shows exactly who we appealed and their responses to the FOIL appeal. So 60% denied our FOIL appeal and 40% approved it. One in particular I'm going to mention is Division of Budget. We appealed that after they denied us that we didn't request a record. And upon appealing for it, they actually provided us a log. So there are 5 agencies that we list in our report of who provided a log of their actual records. And in future graphs that you'll see, we estimated what their information was, because some graphs were very well done, but others were not. So as a total FOIL requests for 2022, this 63 state agencies responding of 70 had a total of 79,523 FOIL requests for the year 2022, which is a lot. This was the average time to complete a FOIL request in 2022 based on the agencies that provided that information. And on the logs, we estimated their average time. The only log we were not able to was the Board of Elections. They had almost 2,000 FOIL requests, 12 different documents for their logs, and it was quite extensive. So we did not go through and average out their time. And these are the state agencies that didn't track the amount of time to complete a FOIL request. So they provided no response to us as to whether what their average time was to fill a FOIL request. This one is in regards to the FOIL's requests that they received and whether they granted them in full, granted in part. In some cases, they did not state whether they granted in full or in part, so we left it as unspecified. And then also the ones they denied. And these are the only agencies of the 63 that provided that information. And this is the number of FOIL appeals received in 2022 by the state agencies that reported this information. And Department of Corrections, 868 appeals was not too bad considering they received thousands and thousands of FOIL requests. In this graph, this is the FOIL's appeals received by the agencies that upheld their denial of their FOIL appeals. Not everybody provided information on their FOIL appeals to all of our questions. As you can see, the public was only successful 35% and unsuccessful 65% in getting their records. This graph addresses FOIL appeals received in 22 and granted in part. So it's just specifically granted in part based on their FOIL appeals. And these are the FOIL appeals received and the records that were granted. So as you can see, it's a small number of agencies that provided that information, as well as a small number of FOIL appeals they granted. And that is it. On to you, Paul.
Okay, so I know it's hard to look at some of those graphs and charts quickly as we're going through it now, but they are all are posted online, so you can look through them and spend more time. But a tremendous amount of time and effort was put into analyzing this information and making these charts and graphs. And I really thank Anne Marie for putting that time in to do that. So just a few more things before we open it up to questions. So at the federal level, the Federal Freedom of Information Act, they require federal agencies to track their requests that they receive. And they're required to document their response time, number of denials, the appeals, all the information that we ask for here, they are required to do at the federal government. And we use that as a model, as a practice that we should implement here in New York. My understanding is that two nearby states, Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, have a similar law where they require their agencies to maintain a log and track these things. New York currently does not. We picked these 70 state agencies because they're the 70 agencies that Governor Hochul directed to prepare transparency plans. So these agencies all have a transparency plan of some sort. You can see them online. Some are very good, some are not very good. But part of this was putting those agencies to the test here with this FOIL request and to find out what they are tracking, if anything at all. And as we saw, not many are tracking this information. So we have several bills recommended in this report to address the reforms needed in our FOIL system. And so I just want to quickly go over these 4 bills and then open it up for questions. The first bill is right on target with this report, is introduced by Senator Hoylman Siegel and Assemblymember John McDonald, and that is to require government agencies at the state and local level to maintain a log, to track response times, to track appeals and denials. So that bill has been introduced. It's pending right now in Albany. And this report clearly shows there's a need for that because this information is just not known. The agencies are not keeping track of this information. So we very much support that bill. And this report is right in line with that. That bill also has the support of 30 other groups across the state. We were in Albany in March lobbying on this bill and some others. So we hope that that bill will pass the state legislature and that the governor will sign it. We need more than just transparency plans. We need to actually take the next step and require maintaining of logs and reporting of this information. Another bill we have is for attorney fee reform. If you go through the time and expense to hire an attorney to sue regarding a FOIL request and you win, you should receive your attorney fees. Right now, New York's law is very weak, in that you have to jump through quite a few hoops to get attorney fees. Other laws in other states are actually better as far as getting attorney fees. So we hope that that bill will also pass. A third bill, and I should say that bill is sponsored by Assembly Member Phil Steck and Senator Lieu. A third bill is to create an independent hearing officer system. Right now, if your FOIL appeal is denied, which is, it's an internal appeal, and 35 to 40% of people are only successful, according to the report we did today, your only recourse is to hire an attorney and sue. There should be some other way to address open meeting law complaints, FOIL complaints, short of going to court. And we believe there should be a hearing officer system created. We have a bill sponsored by Assembly Member Rosenthal, which just follows the system that's in place for property tax assessment challenges. You fill out an application form, pay a filing fee, the court appoints a hearing officer, and within 60 days, you can get a decision. We think the same thing needs to be done for these types of issues. And the last bill is a bill by Assemblymember Raga and Senator Skoufis, and that's to impose some more strict deadlines in responding. A couple of the agencies here had, every 20, 30 days requesting more time, and we see that frequently. This bill puts it on it that an agency has to make a decision whether they're going to deny or grant a request within 30 days, and the documents have to be provided within 60 days. None of this continuing extensions and going on and on. So those four bills would make a big improvement to our current FOIL system. I know we all have had our own personal experiences with how difficult this can be. Many members of the news media, I know, experience this regularly. We need to do things differently. We need to change the system. And the first step in changing the system is getting the information. We need the data to see what's happening. And right now, we don't have that data. Everyone is in the dark. Legislators, the public, the media, state agencies themselves are in the dark as to what is happening with their FOIL requests. So we need to fix that. So if anyone has any questions, please, if you can, raise your hand. And Mr. Benson.
Hey, Paul, how are you?
Good.
Obviously, these laws are in place right now with the FOIL law. What penalties are there if these agencies don't respond accordingly?
So right now, there's no law in place regarding having to maintain a log. But there are certainly laws in place now to, they have time periods to respond to FOIL requests, and they're supposed to provide information except for certain exceptions. And we know that the law is frequently violated. And unfortunately, in New York, unlike a lot of other states, New York does not impose penalties. In other states, they impose fines for violating the law. They impose attorney fees more readily. It's a problem in that there's no real enforcement of the law other than a member of the public or media hiring an attorney. That's why we like this hearing officer system. So there's some mechanism for people to have their complaints addressed cheaply and quickly. But penalties and enforcement is a real problem. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Axel.
I was just wondering, excellent report, by the way. In how far after doing these reports a couple of times, and we may be able to answer to that. I have the feeling that a lot of agency extensions are basic, just automatic, right? That you follow things that are actually relatively easy to produce, right? But the moment they get a FOIL request, they immediately file for an extension, right? I was wondering if you have any overview how often that happens, and also how you feel if this is basically a violation of the spirit of the law, right? Because I think the extension should be granted if if it is hard to compile the data, and it should not be a standard reply to abuse that system. I was wondering if you had any experience and thoughts on that.
That's a good question and a good point, and we do see that frequently where pretty much every FOIL request sent to some places gets a boilerplate response. And we've seen some agencies where their standard response is we will get back to you within 6 months. And that just shouldn't be the case. There are certainly some requests that will take longer than others. There are certainly requests that are ahead of you, but some requests should not take 6 months, 9 months, a year. There has to be a better way of handling that. But there is this, and I think it does violate the spirit of the law, that, if we just tell them they're going to have to wait. And I've heard stories where people have waited years to get responses. It's just, we need a better, and the first way to correct that is, how often is that happening? We don't have the data. We don't have the statistics. So that's why we need this, FOIL reporting bill. Anyone else?
I have a question. I don't know if you see my hand, Anne Marie.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. It's kind of like almost matches my wall. But, so I just want to point out a few things that I do want to first thank all the volunteers that worked on this project, because it took a large amount of us, not just to FOIL for all the records, but also then to verify all the information that ended up in our report. We wanted to make sure it was as accurate as possible. So I do want to put out a thank you to everyone that worked on it, including our 2 interns from STOP, who spent a lot of their summer doing our FOIL requests. But I also like to point out that it would be really nice for the agencies to actually have to put in a FOIL request themselves to their own agencies to really see what the public goes through to get a record. Some agencies were very clear on their website, others were not, required us not only to appeal, or I'm sorry, not just to put in an email FOIL request, but a lot of them would email us back and tell us that email doesn't work, or it doesn't exist, or whatever the issue was, and you'd have to find another route. They do have some of the agencies use what's called GovQA, where you go in and you put your information in, and it sets up an account, and you can use that account. But that account does not work for FOIL appeals. You're still left with either doing a mail-in FOIL appeal, or you have to email the appeal officer. But if you're using a system such as GovQA, you should be able to do your FOIL appeals in the same system that you're putting in your FOIL request and getting your responses. I'd really like the state agencies to look at how their GovQA system is working, or how it's not working. We had so when we did multiple agencies that had GovQA, you could not use, you had to set up an account for each agency. None of them are connected. You don't just set up one account and use it across 70 agencies. You have to create one for each agency. And one of our volunteers, he did that. And when he got to his next agency, it wouldn't let him create an account because it said his username was already utilized. Well, it's his email. Who else could be using it? So he ended up having to create a second email just to get his FOIL put in through the GovQA account. So I think there's a lot of improvement that can be done, not only just tracking the information, which is obviously very important for them to see about the response times and so forth, but they should be looking at their systems as far as, are they working, are they not? They should offer technical support for GovQA, which they do not. So if you have a problem, you're just stuck and you try to get in the next day. And they should also have clear and concise information on their websites. Because to put out an email of where you can do a FOIL request only to get a response back that the email doesn't exist, that's pretty bad. They need to spend some time, and again, tracking the FOILs and knowing how their response times are and so forth are very important, especially when they have a transparency policy and they're the 70 agencies that were required to have it. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Good point. As Anne Marie mentioned, and it is addressed in our report, we ran into quite a few bureaucratic issues with just trying to submit requests. It shouldn't be this hard to submit a FOIL request, but we ran into quite a few issues. Any other questions?
Actually, can I point out one more thing too? We did have an agency that we actually had this issue with their email didn't work. I ended up having to put in another FOIL request. They didn't, it was through their GovQA. They did not respond. So I ended up appealing it in August. And after 10 days, we considered it denied because they never responded, but they actually did respond. They responded in October. And they said it was because they never got the FOIL appeal. And that was their delay. They provided partial information, but I did see that they were the only ones that on a FOIL appeal where they actually carbon copied the New York State Committee on Open Government, which they're required to do. So just some information.
Any other questions? Before I get to Axel, since he already asked a question, any other questions? All right, Axel, back to you.
It's just a follow-up on the previous question with the delays, and especially the suspicion or reason of suspicion that these delays might sometimes be automatically built into the auto response. Because a lot of FOIL information, FOIL requests, especially from the media, have a timeliness aspect to it, right? They may be, and so I think again, in the spirit of the legislation, if you basically know that an agency is by default going to take 6 months to respond as a member of the media or somebody else who has more time, needs a more timely response, that negates, you basically don't have access to government information as outlined in the law within a certain time frame, right? So that I feel that is quite shocking, and most probably by design, right?
And our reporter friends deal with that struggle every day. Any other questions? Going once? Mark Shearer, I think, posted something in the chat there. I don't know where it went, so I don't know what he said.
He said, hey, Paul, what should people do? Residents, voters, what do they need to do?
Okay. Well, we need people to help get these bills passed on our website at nyopengov.org. We have a list of the bills that we are supporting. We've gotten great support from our trip to Albany, and we were all volunteers. When we went to Albany, legislators were shocked that we went there at our own expense, at our own time as volunteers. They're so used to just meeting with paid lobbyists and paid staff. None of the members of the coalition are paid. We're passionate about open government enough that we actually went ourselves to Albany. And I think that really made a big impact with legislators. So there's several bills on our website. Feel free to contact your legislator, any other legislators, and encourage them to support these bills. The FOIL log bill, FOIL reporting bill has made it out of committee. So the next step is for it to be voted on by the full legislature. So it's also important to get the legislative leadership behind this, you know, the heads of the Senate and the Assembly. And when the time comes, we need to pressure Governor Hochul to support these. Governor Hochul has spoken a lot about how important transparency is to her, but quite honestly, we haven't seen much action. We've seen a lot of talk. So hopefully we can get a couple bills on her desk and she can show us how supportive of transparency that she really is. And we encourage people to join the coalition and get involved and participate. Again, you can do that through our website. Members of the media are welcome to join us as well. Any other questions?
I think it's also important that the public be involved in their government, their local governments especially, because that's where you have the most power. But also a lot of people are not aware of that FOIL appeals officers can also be your board. And when it's your board, they must actually address your appeal. If you do a FOIL appeal, they must address it at a board meeting in order for the supervisor to sign and send you your denial or your approval. So there are different ways to address things besides just the legislative. You can also call your legislators to support our legislation that helps improve the FOIL system.
Anyone else? Otherwise, we'll wrap things up. We appreciate everyone for taking the time to attend. We'll send out a copy of the report by email and a copy of this recording, but it is up on our website. Feel free, if you have any questions about the report, to shoot me an email. And we'll end it here at that point. So thank you so much for participating.